Let's go to Matt Park. Matt, how are you today?
I'm good, guys. How's it going?
Good. Where do you want to start? I'll leave it up to you.
Let me go lightning round if you want. Jordan said you just kind of teased some. I wasn't listening the last 10 minutes, but I've been listening pretty regularly, so go ahead.
Well, okay, so you know what? We've gotten calls. Everybody's trying to figure out what is the issue with this year's Syracuse basketball team. What do you think is the problem right now?
Probably not good enough. I think the roster. I think the thing that's most accurate about what happened or why are they not good enough is that the acquisitions in the offseason have not probably lived up to what the expectation was. So then it comes down to, what did you expect them to be? I don't think anybody did expect Eddie Lampkin to come in and average 18 and 12. That's unfair. He's never done that. I don't think it was fair to expect Quinn Carlos to come in and average 12 and 8. And they haven't lived up to that. They've had their moments. And I think it's a lot of pieces that they're trying to figure out. There's not a perfect player. There might not be too many perfect players in the country. There's not a lot of fully developed two-way players on this team, so there's a lot of flaws for them to work through, and they're doing the best they can to put it together and have obviously come up short here a little bit. So, I don't think there's an easy answer. I think when people say, every team's got new players or has to work through the challenge. Yep, they do. And to me, it's the equivalent of sort of rolling dice, right? You want to play Yahtzee, you roll 5 dice. Sometimes that total comes out 30-something, and sometimes it comes out 11, and they're somewhere in between. And that's among the reasons when you start talking about firing the coach and all that, he's not going to be fired, number one. I've said that consistently. 2, if you think, what are they most guilty of? Well, maybe they misread or couldn't get it done as well in terms of building this roster. And okay, if that's the thing they're most guilty of, they deserve one more crack at it. And the early returns on next year are good. So let's see where it goes and let's let it play out.
What went wrong in the second half of that FSU game? Because that first half looked like, that's the offense we want to see out of Syracuse. It's, Bell is hitting threes. JJ's getting open looks. Everybody was getting looks.
Even the defense at times.
What went wrong in the second half of the FSU game?
Well, they're just not that good on defense, and I think over the long haul, that gets exposed. Again, not that they're not coaching it or what have you. I think, whatever the reason is that you give up 54 points, to me, there were a lot of straight line drives. Florida State got to the line a lot, which they're known to do. I don't have it right in front of me. When they had, I think, 18 made free throws in the second half. Yeah. So at least you're fouling and sending these guys to the line. But Jameer Watkins, everybody knows, gets to the line. The officials know that too. He plays in a way that's aggressive and demands that you call fouls. Syracuse doesn't really have a player that does that right now. Judah Mintz did that. Tyus Battle did that. Right now, they don't have somebody that's an aggressive driver. Kyle Tuff might be the closest that they have in that category. And so I think a lot of things came apart, and it's tougher to hold it together on the road, and they didn't hold it together.
I said yesterday between Davis and Watkins, they made 19 free throws in the basketball game. Davis a perfect 10 for 10. Well, when you look at the return of JJ, can he do enough, Matt, to mask some of the errors of this basketball team, some of the ills of the team?
Can Starling? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, of course. Look, there's no team that if you lop off their best player is going to be as good. Mm-hmm. And that's true at any level. That's absolute. And this team in particular was probably more affected by it because it certainly affected another player in Chris Bell. The guy that you have that's supposed to be a steadying influence, Quinn Carlos, does that, but he hasn't played to his best potential. If he was doing everything he's supposed to do just right, you probably wouldn't be prone to this many turnovers. Not that he's been making them all, okay? But then they don't have a bulk of other, ball handling options and that type of thing. So Starling coming back not only returns a guy who plays 35-plus minutes, scores close to 20 points a game, knocks Bell down on the scouting report a little bit, gives Carlos a breather and a second, helper to move the ball and get into sets and that type of thing. So that's why I think the Starling loss was so impactful. He really makes a ripple effect on a lot of other players.
Matt, do you see Chris Bell starting again, or is he going to be coming off the bench from now on?
I do see him starting again. I think with him, it's a volume kind of thing. I mean, to me, one of the disappointing parts of the Florida State game was go miss a shot. I'd rather see him take a questionable shot once in a while. He wants to have everything perfect. And when it is perfect, he makes a boatload of shots. We all know that. When he's got time and rhythm and he's in his spot, he makes those shots. In practice, he'll go on long streaks of not missing because he's in that environment. In a game, it's hard to get those. You think about rattle off all the shooters that you like and the prolific scorers here in recent past. Not everything was perfect. They took off balance shots. They got fouled. They created. Chris Bell doesn't really do a lot of that. I don't think him coming off the bench is a long-term solution. I think you want him in the game because if it's going well, it could go great for Chris Bell. And we've seen that. I just think he's a guy that's got to get in there and get his shots up. And I don't mean 4. I mean 8 to 10.
Paulie talked about, Matt, guys, a JJ, Donnie, guys that probably, want to be playing 40 minutes. When you got a guy like Donnie, he had 16 and 10 last game, but there was obviously flaws in the game. Like, how do you balance that of keeping him out there when maybe you can't because you don't have anyone really behind him?
Yeah, I mean, I think the head coach has a philosophy of balance. He wants people in the game. He wants to substitute regularly, particularly at this part of the year. He's kind of bracing for these guys hitting a wall and to have some juice in the second half of the season. And yes, I hear all the callers and I can see the eyes rolling of people saying, well, wait a minute, you got to win these games. Of course you do. So he's dealing with that sort of balance, but particularly freshmen with getting those types of minutes. It's not common. It's not unheard of here. Not common for freshmen. If you're thinking, 35 minutes and up, that's not regular. Certainly not with big people. So yeah, Donnie's a really good player. You'd love to see him, but be careful. He's a guy who obviously has flaws defensively and otherwise. He had a couple stretches in the Florida State game. Just lack of recognition. Pass the ball to Chris Bell. He's a better shooter, right? That's how it's supposed to work. And I think learning to play at this level like that is something that Donnie's working through, and you're not always going to have Donnie on the floor. But he's obviously gifted. He's bouncy. He's a rebounder. There's a lot of positives to his game, and you're excited about the future for him.
There's been a lot of the sky is falling here in Syracuse with basketball, and they may be right. How important are these next 2 games for Syracuse basketball?
Well, they're really important. I think it always comes back to when people say, oh, these are must-wins or guarantee this win or that. Against what? What's your definition of the alternative, right? I mean, if they lose these games, the likelihood, certainly we know the NCAA tournament right now doesn't appear to be super likely. It's not completely off the map, but they would really have to turn things around. Obviously, gulp. Everybody, is kind of awakened to the fact this team could miss the ACC tournament if it went really terrible, and that's just unthinkable. So you would, yes, obviously winning these games starts to move you in a direction that avoids that. And everybody's anxious, right? You got to get that first one. Before you can get 5, 6, 8, 10 ACC wins, you got to get that first one. And these are teams, certainly when you're talking about these games they played are not in intimidating environments, right? So there's a long way to say, yes, they've got to win these games, okay? If they lose them, then I think we already know, you're in for a year where you're going to take your lumps because they're going to be in rough shape. And go back to the idea about, you were talking about some of the goofy stuff during the week, Paul, and I love Scooter. the concept of campus gyms versus, the old NBA arenas that you played in the Big East days. He's not wrong about that, except that it has no application at all to this team.
Yeah.
This team's lost at the Barclays Center. The places they've gone and lost on the road are not intimidating road environments. There was nobody at the Notre Dame game. Florida State's a cool environment when things are going well, but the students weren't there, and they didn't lose the game because of the venue or the fan environment or any of that. Now you're at home. Then you go to Boston College. That's nothing. Some of these games on the horizon, forget about it. So while that concept does have some merit, big picture, another time, it's not right now.
Let me ask you another of the silly things that I can't believe comes up.
We're not going there.
Yeah, well, that's where I was going next.
Is it in?
The shirt untucked thing. Am I crazy to think that that's been going on for years with every team?
I don't understand what context is that even possibly brought up in.
Undisciplined. That's what we're saying is the team is undisciplined.
So the alternative is what? You want them out there in full military uniform or everybody to be identical? That's not what this is. I don't. Every team has that. Every single one. So I don't understand what that's indicative of. If you want to say to somebody like a Donnie Freeman, hey, how many times do you need to be told? I think there's something there. Look, they're not going to just all of a sudden let it slide. So when you come into the game, tuck your shirt in. I do think there's something to be dealt with there, but they got bigger fish to fry than that.
Yeah. The other thing with this always cracks me up. It's like we need to get back to the days of Derek Coleman, and then they're telling me to tuck your shirt in. Like Derek Coleman never had his jersey tucked in, and the stuff he did on the court was far worse than any of these kids were doing.
Yeah, right. That's just revisionist history.
Yeah.
Matt, can I ask you one football question about Kyle? And obviously, we don't know the decision, but for you, like looking at Kyle, like. What would be the reason that he would come back to Syracuse if he gets a fifth year?
Look, I love the fact that he's even keeping the option open.
Agreed.
And I love to me, I don't see it, okay? But I love that the fan base thinks it and is at least intrigued enough to pay attention to think maybe it can happen. Because if it does happen, not only would it be incredible, two, everybody's going to have to open up the pocketbooks because that's what it's going to take to make it happen for him. And there's a trickle-down effect for everybody else in the modern world of college sports. What would be the reason? I think if he gets a feeling that he's closer to the end of the draft than the beginning, and he gets the perception that he could make the type of money here in one more year that would be on par with what he might make as a reserve practice squad backup guy in the NFL, and understand that if he just delays his clock a little bit, he's helping, not hurting his overall earning potential down the road. Those are the types of things that I think you have to think about. You said probably what somebody on the chat was like, no, Quinn Allen isn't ready. Get out of here. When you're that close.
Exactly. Especially him. Yeah. Go.
What would you wait for?
Yeah.
At the running back position? Are you kidding me?
What more do you have to show if you're LaQuinn Allen? You can catch the football, you can block, and you can score.
Stop.
Yeah.
And I always say this. The NBA and the NFL, they don't draft only ready players.
Yeah. They
draft players that they project into certain spots when they are available. Okay? LaQuint has shown what he's going to show. He's not a guy whose stock is going to rise by coming back. And I say specifically, I feel more strongly about it when you talk about the running back position. Running backs have only so much mileage, only so many hits they're going to take. That's the perception in pro football of why they're sort of expendable and this guy's as good as the next guy. They're just running through them. So it's just an exception. If you have more than a 4-year career in the NFL as a running back, you are a true stud and truly fortunate injury-wise and everything else. So if you say, hey, I've got 4 or 5 years in that wheelhouse, once you've demonstrated that you're NFL worthy, I don't think you're doing yourself a proper service by spending one more of those years in college.
Yeah.
That all being said, and I understand this is a long-winded answer, I do think one of the few things that is pro-fan in the NIL era is it didn't work out here, but it could someday. You can keep that guy like a Jesse Edwards, like a Joe Girard, like that's not an NBA player. You can keep that guy maybe for another year with kind of the compensation if all are on board to want that and can execute that, because that guy's in position now to make a decision. Can I earn a little more? What's his nuts? Armando Baycott is the best example.
Perfect
right?
example.
He could make more in one more year in Carolina than he could by testing the waters in pro basketball, because he wasn't going to be an NBA player, and he owned up to that. So there's a category of player where that sort of works out, and you can kind of retain the fan favorite and that type of thing. Now, again, that makes sense in theory and on paper. It actually has to happen. I mean, obviously Jesse Edwards found another opportunity, and Joe Girard, it worked out for everybody that he moved on. So that's just in theory right now. It's just another element of the new world.
All right, Matt. I'll see you tonight at the Dome. Lucky you.
Guys.
Thanks,
Lucky
Matt.
you. You get to see me. What an honor. All right. Well,
I don't think you're seeing me tomorrow. So
we'll take a break. We'll come back, and then what's his nuts will be here tomorrow.
I knew that's what you were laughing at.
We'll pick our artist of the day. The longest show ever. It's ESPN Radio, Syracuse, Houston, Rome, QSportstalk.com.
I thought that's what you were laughing at.